At some point in the first few days, you became a television star and a media star, did you not?
Well, I was on television after I had talked to Lee Harvey Oswald.
Tell us, go back to the beginning of that and tell us how all that came about. Where were you when you first learned the president had been?
The president was assassinated on Friday.
Yeah. Where were you?
At the World Trade Center. My wife and I were there for a luncheon that they were having for the president. And we had to get there early because he was due at 12 o'clock. We had to get there at 11:30. Everybody's to be seated time the president got there. And we were there, and the police officer I knew came running by. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Can't tell you. I'll be back in a minute." And he came back and said the president had been shot. And then someone else came up on the stadium, the rostrum there, and they said the president had been shot. And of course, the luncheon was canceled, and we left and went home. And then heard the rest of the news later on about he had died. The next day, a Saturday afternoon, I received a telephone call from a lawyer friend of mine whose name I've forgotten. And he wanted to know if Lee Harvey Oswald had a lawyer. I said, "I don't know why he had a lawyer or not. Why do you want to know?" He said, "Well, he had received a call from a lawyer up in the East Coast. He was the dean of a law school, and said that the news media up there was saying that Oswald couldn't get a Dallas lawyer to represent him." And this fella said, "Well, I just want to know if you knew anything about it." I said, "I don't know anything about it." He said, "Well, can you or will you do anything about it?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll look into it." That's the perfect excuse. And so after I talked to him, I thought, well, I better. So I called a lawyer friend of mine who practiced criminal law. I had forgotten what the obligation was to provide attorneys for indigents. It's just something I never run into except in school. And he said that until a person has been indicted, there was no obligation at that time to provide a lawyer. This was before the Miranda case, 3 years before the Miranda case came down. And he said once he's indicted, if it comes to the attention of a judge that doesn't have a lawyer, well, he'll appoint one. I said, well, that takes care of it. Nothing else for me to do about that because he had not been indicted. There's no obligation. Got another call shortly after, another lawyer. He'd gotten a call from a dean of a law school up east and said, why can't Oswald get a lawyer? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I got a call from this dean up there, and he says that the Dallas lawyers won't represent him. I said, well, I don't know anything about it. I told him what I had done. I said, I don't know there's any more for us to do. He said, well, will you do something? I said, well, I don't know what to do, but I'll look into it. And so I got to thinking about it and decided that maybe somebody ought to do something because nobody appeared to be doing anything. So I called Henry Wade's office and talked to Henry. He was district attorney. And asked him if he knew whether Oswald had a lawyer. He said he didn't know. It hadn't been brought to his attention, one way or the other. He said he was going up to City Hall later and that he'd make some inquiry, and if they were interested in it, well, he'd have somebody call me. And I said, well, let me know. Then I called a Glenn King, who was a chief police assistant, administrative assistant, and I asked Glenn about it. I said, does Oswald have a lawyer? He said, well, I don't know whether he has that or not. And I said, has anyone come up to see you? And he said, no. And then I told him my interest in what I found out. And I said, if he wants a lawyer and you know about it, well, tell him of our conversation. He said, well, I'll put it back. Well, you just come up and see him yourself if you want to. And I said, I'm not prepared to do that. I hadn't thought about doing that. More thought about it, I didn't know what to do. Then I got a call from Charlie Galvin, who's a professor out at SU, and he said, Lewis, what are you doing about Oswald getting a lawyer? I said, I don't know, not doing anything. I didn't know I was supposed to do anything. He said, well, I think you ought to go up there. He didn't say we ought to go up there and talk to him. I think you ought to go up and talk to him and find out what the situation is. And I said, well, I'm not sure whether I should do that or not. I did not know whether I should go and do anything as president of the Bar Association. I had not been authorized to do it. I hadn't talked to anybody on the board of directors or anything about it. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, somebody's got to do something. And nobody is, so I'll just do it. So I changed clothes and went up to City Hall and asked for the chief, and he wasn't in. Glenn King wasn't in. And then the chief came in, whom I knew, and he said, "What are you doing here, Lewis?" And I said, "Well, Glenn King said I could come up and talk to Oswald, Mr. Oswald, if he needs a lawyer." And he said, "Well, come on, I'll take you." And so he took me up to the next floor and went into a room about as big as this. There were 3 cells, and somebody was in the middle, and nobody knew what to do. And there was Oswald, and he opened the door, introduced me to Oswald, and said, as president of the Bar Association, I come to see if he needs a lawyer. And he just put me in the cell, locked the door, and walked away. Well, I reintroduced myself to Oswald and suggested we sit down. So we sat down on the bunks, just practically knee to knee, and I asked him if he had a lawyer or needed a lawyer. And he wanted a fellow named John Apt, who was a New York lawyer, and said I didn't know him. And he said, well, he knew of him, and if he could get a lawyer, he was the one he wanted. But he said, if I can't get one, why, I might call you. I said, let it be understood. Do you want the Dallas Bar Association to get you a lawyer or help you get a lawyer? And he said, not now. I said, that's all I want to know. I'll get you a lawyer or try to get you a lawyer if you can. He said, no, not now. May call on you next week. Well, if I'd known he was going to get shot the next day, I'd ask him some more questions, but I didn't ask him anything. So I knocked on the door, and they came over and let me out. And then I went out, and the interview you were talking about on television.
Quite a few reporters
Oh,
camped out down there.
That 3rd floor was just jammed like that with news media. Yeah, but it turned out that it was fortunate that I did what I did, I guess, because the lawyers did not get criticized. Of all the people in Dallas on the Kennedy assassination, the lawyers did not get criticized. It was dumb luck, I guess, on my part.
I don't imagine that was dumb luck. It was good judgment.
Well, it turned out to be fortunate, yeah.
Fortunate for all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.